Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 43 with Joe Levy. Really fun episode. Joe's a guy that I've worked around and with for a good bit, but never really sat down to have a good conversation. I'm glad that we made time for this. It's a really great discussion about his background. He's a big higher ed assessment and data nerd. I respect him a lot for how deep and invested he is in this work. He's involved in a lot of different stuff. I'll link out to everything that he does down in the show notes and ways for you to connect with him. So I highly encourage you to do that. And it's a really engaging episode, and hopefully you enjoy it as much as I did, recording it. So after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 43 with Joe Levy. This episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast is brought to you by Top Hat, the teaching app that makes active learning come to life. Top Hat helps thousands of professors create their perfect course. Our app is easy to use and allows you to engage your class, adopt next-generation textbooks, and run tests, all within a secure digital environment. See why faculty in over 700 colleges and universities across North America trust Top Hat to power their classrooms. Visit tophat.com/higheredgeek. That's tophat.com/higheredgeek. Well, I guess, have you been up to anything fun over the summer, I guess? I don't know how much time you've had to, take any vacations or anything like that.
Probably we're saving up, not to give away one of my responses for things I'm looking forward to, but at the end of September, we're going to Hawaii. So this summer we've been kind of not doing a lot of traveling. But the one thing we did do that was really cool was we moved my grandmother into an assisted living facility. Mm-hmm. And she's not a pack rat, but she has just so much stuff. And so the family was going through her stuff because she really wanted, she wanted her things to kind of live on and wanted people to value them like she valued them. But the really neat thing is I wanted to go through her books because I remember going to her house and there being this bookshelf with books that I remember thinking the dates were really old. And so going back through them, I found two instructional manuals, one for teaching English, another one for teaching math, and they're both from the 1870s. And then I found a textbook, like a handbook, almost like what to expect your freshman year. And that was dated from 1913. And the really interesting thing about that one, too, is that was owned by my great aunt. And so I thought it was really interesting that, this, and I mean, even when you read the text, it like starts out, it's like, what, because it's written from the perspective of the faculty, and it's like, what grown men can do for our young boys. So I just thought that was what a wild, like I can only imagine what, women thought, going through higher education at that time when, even the literature was omitting them from the conversation. And then the final piece was I found handwritten notes from my great grandfather in a psychology class from the early 1900s. And so I point out what's the most fascinating about all these, or serendipitous, is I was an English and math major, and then I obviously went on to get my degree in higher ed. So there was a book for all my academic disciplines, and then my partner got her undergrad and grad degree in psychology, and so I found that other book for her, and so it was just so wild that I found all these old books all on one bookshelf, hitting all our disciplines. And so now I have those books displayed in my office.
Very cool. I think a lot of those things may live on, but they may be just in a library somewhere, like it'd be hard to find, like, unless you were looking for it, but then you had all that stuff there, like, just to go through and like check out versus like, you'd have to spend hours and hours, like, oh, let me just like wander every single aisle in like a library or something, or like, like trying to find, something you didn't even know existed. But it's like, yeah, that would be so cool to me too. Yeah. Like having that opportunity to, I mean, like some of the personal stuff like that, like, personal notes, but then also just like stuff that's been around for a very long time. And you get this very unique insight of just like, it was a product of its time. So it's like, just, as much as we can learn from like history, like looking back, it's like those like primary artifacts. Like this was a book from like the 1800s. That's wild. So yeah, that's pretty neat. Cool. So yeah, we'll get to, more stuff in the body of the episode. And we'll start out here, though, as we always do. If you just want to give a quick introduction of who you are and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Joe Levy, and I am currently the Executive Director of Assessment and Accreditation at National Louis University in Chicago, Illinois. I have, as many higher ed people do, I've had an interesting path. Prior to higher ed, I'm a military brat, so I grew up all along the East Coast, moved every 2 years or less. So it's always an interesting question to answer, where I consider home or where I'm from, because I lived in 8 different states by the 2nd grade.
Wow.
But I lived the longest in Ohio, and that's also where I went to college. So I like to think of Ohio as my home base, even though my family is no longer there. But yeah, I did my undergraduate there at Baldwin-Wallace College. Now they're Baldwin-Wallace University. And I was a double major in math and English, but by sophomore year was turned on to the student affairs path. And from talking with career services and identifying it was something that I was passionate about and being able to pair that passion with an actual career path, I started down that road. And so as I was being really intentional in my college experiences, I ended up bumping math down to just a minor because it was starting to certainly dominate my my free time and getting increasingly harder. And knowing that while it was interesting and fascinating, it was not going to be immediately applicable to my future path. So then I went from BW on to Colorado State University. I wanted to be So BW was a small private liberal arts institution in the Midwest. And as I mentioned, growing up, I lived along the East Coast. And so I really wanted to be intentional with the next institution in trying to go to a different institutional type, as well as to go somewhere geographically different. And so I searched a number of different institutions, but ultimately ended up at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. Got my master's in student affairs and higher education there. And then from there, CSU is actually where, just like BW helped me put a name to student affairs and working in higher ed, CSU helped me put a name to assessment. That was something that once I formally found out about it, I realized that's how I had been operating. Even as a student, I was wanting to know what people thought of our student activities and how we can use that data to improve, and are we actually achieving our intended outcomes and targets. And so once I learned about assessment, one, I became increasingly fascinated in it, and two, I also realized I was one of the few people in the room that just kind of got it. It just made sense to me. And so coming out of grad school, I really wanted to do assessment full time. But unfortunately at the time, and still a little bit now, although the field and the market's gotten better, there aren't a lot of entry level assessment jobs. A lot of it is, being an analyst or, really tuned to somebody who maybe came from a hard science background or, stats, or they're deep in research. And so they're coming from a specific discipline and have that background, which none of those situations were me. And so I was fully prepared to just kind of go a typical student affairs route and kind of take any position and then volunteer and say that I was interested in assessment, because as many people know, sometimes those folks are rare, and when they make themselves known, they immediately get snatched up on committees, or people are happy to have them help with their work. So I was going to go that route, but then an opportunity came available to apply for a position at then Student Voice, now Campus Labs. And so I went there and worked as an assessment consultant, assistant director of assessment programs for a couple years, which is a little interesting because it's a little backwards. A lot of people work at institutions and then go to be a consultant, or then go to work outside the industry. But it was an opportunity for me to do assessment 24/7, and I loved it. It was incredibly amazing and such a training ground for me, and really taught me so much more, as well as I got to work with 40 to 50 institutions that were my own, and I got to help cultivate their assessment culture over the course of 2.5 years. And then I also was exposed to then assessment culture at hundreds of other universities. And so I walked away from that experience knowing institutional practice at hundreds of universities, and not just reading about the trends of what was going on in assessment in the field, but actually knowing it and being able to point to specific institutional examples, as well as point to contacts and people at those campuses. So from there, I really then, while I really enjoyed my time there, I wanted to then start doing the work myself, because again, I came straight out of grad school to there. So I wanted to get on the campuses myself and own the work myself. So I set out looking to work at different institutions, and I came to University of Chicago, also met my partner here in Chicago, and then since then I've really just worked at a couple different institutions doing assessment work, and over time also got roped in a bit to the accreditation work, which assessment certainly has a big part in demonstrating and evidencing how institutions are operating. And that kind of leads me to here. I've been doing assessment for some years now, and then accreditation now the past 5 or so years, and that's what I'm doing now, assessment and accreditation.
Yeah, I guess I can really appreciate though, like you had a pretty clear vision of the kind of work that you wanted to do, and I know for me, like I've always kind of struggled. Coming up in residence life, it's a very generalist role. You have all these touch points to different things where it's like, oh, that would be cool. If I did that, or it'd be cool to do that. And I have that sort of desire to maybe try to specialize, but then I just kind of, I think I've realized it about my personality in general. I'm just kind of like a sampler. I think I there's part of me, that likes being like a generalist, and, it certainly comes up in my geeky interest. I'll usually just kind of dabble and not get too deep in one particular thing. But then when it came to my professional journey, I think it's still just recognizing maybe more that feeling is a bit more salient, I guess, of just that desire to not specialize in one area. But if you had from the start, you had that clear vision of that was the kind of work that you wanted to do, and you've now done it, like you're saying, right when you started, you saw all these different kind of institution types, and I'm sure on their own they're different phases of their journey, if they were just building something or trying to sustain something that's been around for a while, or if they're getting accredited, that's a whole other kind of process and everything. But I can certainly appreciate people that are, committed to a certain kind of work. And because I think that the depth of, almost if you classify it differently, of geekiness is kind of more of the sampler, getting really nerdy and in depth with one thing, but if you're kind of engaging in those different parts of your brain, I think it's good to have, a lot of those different kind of people working together and stuff like that. So, everything's valuable. There's a place for everything kind of thing. But
I was just going to say, it's really interesting that you say that, because I actually, one of the things I love about assessment is it allowed me to stay in that generalist mindset. So I very much, when I went into graduate school, my sort of secret goal was I need to figure out where in higher ed I'm going to work, because as an undergrad, I did everything and I loved everything. I'm telling you, I mean, you can quiz me if you want, but the only student experience or functional area of the university I did not in some way interact or work in as a student worker, as a volunteer, was study abroad. Everything else I did. I mean, I was a resident assistant. I was an orientation leader. I did athletics. I did theater. I participated with kind of our communications group. I work in our admission office, our alumni office, food service. I mean, I did everything I could because once, and some of that I was doing already just because I, fell in love with the collegiate environment and really felt at home there. But once I knew, like I said, my sophomore year, once it clicked in my head, I wanted to go into student affairs. I then, for me, the best prep for that was I need to know how an institution works. And so I started, trying to get in touch with as much as I could. And so going into grad school, my problem was I said, where am I going to work? How am I going to decide between res life or student activities or admissions or, working in the student union? I mean, I appreciated all those different facets. And so assessment then was this amazing solution because with assessment, you get to work with all those areas. And so even though I was somewhat specializing myself, and I even had some advisors and mentors worry that going down the assessment path might somewhat constrain me, given my abilities. And they know like, oh, you're so great working with students, or oh, you're so great doing this or that. In assessment, they feared I was going to be kind of locked in an office and not only working with data. And
right.
But I said no. It's almost the exact opposite. Is I'm going to get to be working with every single office at a university. I'm going to be getting to impact all those different areas and not constrained or pigeonholed to, well, you're in student activities, so keep your opinions to yourself because res life, they handle their own stuff. You know what I mean? And so I feel like assessment allows me to kind of travel from camp to camp and help break down any silos, or also just at times be a unifier in terms of sharing like, hey, advising, did you know that student activities or orientation or residence life have some very similar student learning outcomes with some of the things that they're doing? You all are working with students in different ways, but you all care about X, Y, or Z. And here's some of the ways that they're measuring that and what they're finding. And, isn't that interesting to compare with what you're finding? And so it's funny you say that, that I found this specialization because I almost thought it was a bit of a cheat in terms of going a career path that still allowed me to explore all my interests and work in different areas of the university.
No, that's a really good point. Like specializing in being a generalist or something, like you found this almost like loophole or something. But yeah, and that's how it should be. Because I think, I was like working off of this limited point of view that like, sometimes it's like each division, each department within the division would have its own like, assessment person, but it's like, it should be like, more transparency and accessibility of data and, so that everyone can kind of make decisions on, how they're going about things. And especially if they have shared goals, they, should have that. There shouldn't be, too many barriers, I guess, especially with certain kind of information, like everyone would probably, benefit from knowing it. But, I think that segues nicely to like, with your current work, it's doing this type of work that you really enjoy doing. Like, what do you enjoy about it most? If it's, maybe just about the institution in particular, or just the kind of level that you've gotten to, like what are the things that kind of keep you engaged right now with your current job?
I would say, it's at its core, I enjoy being able to help other people and promote learning and build capacity. I went into college, growing up, I thought I was going to be a teacher. And when I got to college, I thought that, well, if I'm going to teach, because my eyes were open at college because I went to high school in a village. So it's a very rural, small area. So coming to college was really eye-opening, even at a small institution. And so once I got there, I thought, oh, well, I want to, it was already that seed of wanting to be at the college level. So I thought, well, if I'm going to teach, I want to teach at the collegiate level. And they said, well, if you're going to do that, you don't need to be an education major. You just, specialize in a discipline and go from there. And so for me, I've always had this desire to help other people, help them learn and help them do things on their own. And so what I love about assessment is I get to do that, and it also is a perfect union between my academic strengths of math and English. So I can help take data and help transform or articulate it into information that other people can make sense of and that they can use and convey messages to even other stakeholders. So it's just incredible for me to sit and watch the light bulbs come on when I'm, not necessarily, there's a lot of conversation right now, especially a lot of criticisms in recent opinion pieces in the Chronicle and Time Magazine and Inside Higher Ed about faculty not buying into assessment or not not believing in it or thinking it's just this administrative or compliance related thing. Mm-hmm. And so putting that aside, right, like putting aside the whole well, I'm trying to get buy-in or get them on board. For me, it's I try to get to know them as individuals and what they care about, their area, what their goals are, what they believe they're doing with students. And then I try and let them know that my job is to help them continue doing all of that, but then also to have evidence to back up in case anyone challenges them on how they're doing, or to also just better understand how they're doing. Maybe they haven't ever disaggregated their data to know how students of different races or ethnicities or genders are learning. Maybe they only are looking at these overall averages, and so I can help them with that. Maybe they're, maybe they didn't have access to additional data sets or to pull in demographics, and so they only have what they have, and I can help be the gateway to get additional information. But also, I try to tap into that passion for them to then, by providing them data, help build inquiry and curiosity. And so these are the main things they want to know, but what else is keeping them up at night when they think about student success or when they think about students engaging in their area? And so to see them have that light bulb come on and to see how they, I fundamentally believe if people engage properly in assessment and they have assessment staff and infrastructure that has open communication, that everyone would benefit from assessment and that everyone would see its value. I think the problems come in the communication or the implementation of, well, this is the way we're going to do it. And so you have to fit that mold. But for me, I always try and understand them and look to cater the ultimate process to them so that they see the value and they see the meaning. And even the first time they turn in a report, I kind of put the report aside and ask them, whether you think the results, whether you're happy about them or concerned about them, has this changed anything for you? Have you been able to, do you now have new questions? Do you now feel satisfied? Or if you never did this, is your world still the same? Because if that's the case, then something went wrong. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Whether it was you all not necessarily telling me all the things that matter to you, or maybe we picked a wrong instrument, or maybe it just really didn't turn out the way either of us thought it would. But it should never be the case that you go through an assessment cycle and everything is just as if that cycle never happened and as if the data was never collected. You should always get something, even if it's an affirmation of, well, that's what I thought was happening. Great. Well, now you have evidence and you can, put that out there in case, people don't necessarily listen to you in particular on your campus or, within your area or with students. So, yeah, the thing I love the most is just still being in a position to help educate and help others really help themselves in doing their work and using things that are available to them to advance that. And then on the accreditation side, I really appreciate that because a lot of times with assessment, I don't have any authority. I can recommend things, but at the end of the day, people can do whatever they want because they don't report to me. The faculty report up to their deans and the provost, and the student affairs people report up to their directors and their the vice president of student affairs. Mm-hmm. But accreditation is one of those things that, still the people don't report to me, but there's still this kind of bite to it of this is a compliance issue. If we don't get our accreditation, we can't offer financial aid. If we're not meeting state regulations, we can't operate that location that we have. That we're providing to access to certain institutions in a certain part of the state. So I really like that. There's still, but the other nice thing with accreditation is that I'd say 95, if not higher percent of the time, if you're doing good work, you're meeting accreditation needs. Very rarely, like 5% of the time, you're having to do something in a certain way for compliance sake. Mm-hmm. It's usually, criteria 4B with the Higher Learning Commission, HLC, is the most cited criteria for the 1,000 institutions that HLC accredits, and that is assessment. And it's not because their criteria is asking for anything wild or unique. It's because people struggle with assessment. And so if you're doing good assessment work, then you're going to be fine with criteria 4B. And the same is true with all the other criteria. It's like I said, it's very rarely, if you are doing what you should be doing in your discipline or for your area and for the best interest of the students, you're usually not going to have issues with accreditation. So that's the other thing I really like about it that also pairs well on the assessment side is we're promoting good practice here. And if you're doing good work, following good practice, the accreditation stuff will usually take care of itself. But the nice added benefit, like I said, is if you're not listening to me and you're not heeding my advice, the accreditation has a little more bite there of, well, then you're going to have to answer to our peer reviewers, or you're going to have to answer to the president when we get a report back saying that your area, was not in compliance, or there's some risk concerns here. So I try not to play that card, but it's a great card to have.
Yeah. Because good points of just because you could, do all the analyzing and conveying of helpful information in the world, but, like you said, it's this is meaningless if no action is taken from it, it's the same as if it never happened. Because, it could be confirming that someone is doing good work. So then you would want to deploy more resources where it is, it's showing positive results, or if it's hey, we're trying to achieve this goal, we did not measure up to it. So then you should take action on that of okay, let's stop doing it or change how we're doing it, or, just, deploy resources elsewhere or something, but it's you need that information to kind of internally in an office, figure out how you're going about things, but then also, like you're saying, to prove to other people or help promote, the institution out to say hey, here are the outcomes that we're supporting. And certainly, just the simplest way of the bite that you can have, just we have to be able to just measure these things and show, what we're doing. But, reassuring to most people, it's don't worry about it. Unless you're kind of going, real wild or anything, you should be in a good place. But it's always valuable, again, to have sometimes the affirmation that you are doing good work so that you can continue to do it, maybe invest more in it, or just figure out what you need to start or stop or change and all those sort of things. So it's only so meaningful in that there is meaningful action that is taken from any of these sort of measurements. But so I feel you kind of live in this very kind of properly geeky nerdy realm within higher ed, doing all this stuff. So I'm curious, if maybe it's stuff that feeds in to your professional daily life, or if there's some other purely, it's good things sometimes, purely unrelated geeky things that you're into that, bring you joy and all that. So what are the things that you're enjoying currently? What are you geeking out about currently? And, maybe just highlighting if there are things that you've always been into or stuff that you've discovered more recently.
Yeah. So, work related stuff I'm geeking out about are when there's new kind of regulations and changes that are coming about. GDPR right now, the General Data Professional Regulation in the EU, over in Europe. They passed this regulation that I guess the easiest way to describe it is it's almost like the permission that students can say, you have to be able to forget me, right? Like, you know how that was a thing when that people had maybe with Google, is you want to be able to get rid of pictures or have things removed, and you want to have that right and that freedom. Well, so the EU decided to push this regulation, which you might think, cool, that's happening in Europe. Why is that relevant here? Well, any institution that has international students has to also comply with that, which gets complicated when you think about, if you just pick up the phone right now and call an institution, they're gonna track your phone number. They're gonna try and get your name. They're gonna try and find out like what you're interested in, what you're calling about, and that's gonna sit in a record somewhere. Even if you just called with a random question, because they think, oh well, maybe Dustin's interested, or maybe he'll call back, or and so with the EU, it's it really put institutions in an interesting position of, okay, so how do we continue to do what we do in terms of tracking prospective students or tracking questions, but then being able to go in and identify those things and get rid of them if the person wants us to. So it just presented this really interesting logistical systems related question, and I think a lot of institutions are wrestling that way right now. But that was that's just one example of like a policy related thing that, just to sit around and noodle on a bit. It's interesting to think about, well, like, do we offer that to other students, or are we really only doing that or giving that type of thing for the students of the EU? But thinking about other work related things, still along the lines of data systems, I'm getting a lot more into coding and things like R, which is a combination. It's a statistical language, but it's a combination between like computer science and coding and just your typical stats power, like SPSS. But the neat thing with the language is, and it has this coding interface, is you can create code that will pull data from a website. It will then clean that data and put it in the format that you want, and then it'll publish that as a Word document, or you can even create and publish it as an interactive display on a website. And you can do all of that with just this one little script that you write. So it's really, really powerful, but takes a lot of knowledge. And for me, I'd always been interested in coding, and just never taken the time to do it. And so 2 to 3 years ago, I did a data science specialization through Coursera, and all the content was from Johns Hopkins University, and got decent with R. But then I haven't had the time to play with it much since then. And so, like any other language, if you don't use it, you forget it or you get really rusty. But I'm seeing it pop up more and more because, several years ago when I was learning about it and talking about it, anybody I talked to, nobody knew what I was talking about. The only people that really knew were, I had some friends that were in their PhD programs in the hard sciences, and so they're dealing with a lot of data sets and having to run a lot of analysis, and they knew of it. But a lot of people in the higher ed space really, I couldn't connect with anyone that really knew about it. So now it's becoming a lot more common and a lot more talked about, and even at our institution, we're identifying potential opportunities to utilize it to either make processes more efficient or to find workarounds to, maybe we don't have the platform or the money to pay for certain off-the-shelf vendor services, but ultimately we need something that's going to meet our unique needs. And so why don't we just try and create that on our own through R for the reporting that we want to do, or for, hosting a little data specific website. So I'm geeking out about that, but unfortunately, the geeking is limited because I'm not able to really like sit and play with the data because I just have so many other more administrative things that I have to do. But I'm really excited this year to work with an assessment manager on my team to explore a bit more of that. And that's kind of my excuse and permission to myself to dive back into it a little bit because we have a very real need for doing that type of work this year. And yeah, so I'll be able to get back into that a little more. And then the final piece that I'm geeking out a little bit about is I'm in my doctoral program. I'm about a year in, and I'm already starting to, very lightly and from a cursory perspective, start to pull some articles and things for my ultimate lit review and dissertation related work. But one of the things that in my role with assessment and accreditation, and also what I'm looking to do for my doc program, I just am continuing to slowly dive into the world of faculty. I think they are a very interesting role within the university infrastructure because they have kind of a certain air about them, as well as historically they have expectations placed on them, as well as expectations for how they can act and conduct themselves and operate on a university's campus. And they're honestly given a lot of latitude. They're given a lot of freedoms and things like tenure, where it's providing long-term job security and making it so they don't necessarily have to go to certain meetings or participate in certain processes. It's just an interesting world that staff members don't have at all. And so so I want to dig more into that, and as I continue to find both kind of research related elements of that living in parallel with then day-to-day practical work-related things where I'm needing to work with faculty and needing to better understand their time and their needs in order to achieve mutual success of them participating in these activities, but also me getting things done that are part of my strategy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess that's always like a nice thing when, like, I guess, yeah, you may have limited time outside of the office to like really, get into too much stuff. You're spending quality time like with family or just hanging out, wanting to relax. So if it's like, you have these almost little like side projects or little curiosities that you can kind of geek out about in your professional context, and it helps to keep things fresh, but helps you do your work better or help, other people better, and those sort of things. So it's cool. And yeah, just that you're able to like kind of build that skill through, more flexible education tools like Coursera or something. Because yeah, there's really a lot of good content out there to, build those sort of skills and stuff. So, so I think, I mean, in terms of anything else, obviously you may be more consumed, I guess, with your reading for your doc program. But I guess anything else that's kind of, that you're reading, watching, and or listening to, anything that's in kind of regular circulation or anything noteworthy that you'd want to highlight so we can include it in the show notes.
Yeah, well, to your point, reading at this point is dedicated to my doc program. And then, just like I said, news or things going about in the field of either accreditation or assessment. I am a big geek nerd, trivia buff for Seinfeld, and have, we have a baby now. And so that and the doc program has really put some constraints on my free time, but, had a nice group of folks here in Chicago and that would frequently go to Seinfeld trivia nights. And I mean, we would consistently place, if not win. In my office, I actually have some Seinfeld memorabilia and stuff that we've won at competitions. So So that's always a good go-to, even if I do have free time and maybe there's nothing on. I'm always happy to watch episodes of Seinfeld. Likewise, from a music perspective, I am a huge fan of this rock band, this Atlanta-based rock band called Seven Dust. They've been around since the 90s, and I've been to 20 plus concerts of theirs over the years.
Wow.
I usually go to a concert every kind of new album and tour cycle. They just had a new album come out this summer, and so I was able to go this summer. But yeah, otherwise, I'm a huge fan of the Discover Weekly feature on Spotify to learn more about new music, or also just get updates of, maybe I liked certain tracks by one artist and now they have new music out, or potentially it's old music that maybe I haven't explored.
Yeah.
So I love that feature as well. And then again, with timing constraints, when it comes to TV or movies, I really defer a lot to my partner to let her pick whatever might make her happy, and I'm usually pretty easy to please there. Although I will say one thing that I have been promoting for people to check out, especially if you're into music, is there's, I guess you'd call it a documentary on Netflix called Hired Gun. And it's all about the world and lived experience of musicians who are hired for recordings or shows and just kind of used for a very short time and then kind of let go, like really just temporary type work. And so it's fascinating to hear about, these people that are doing, very memorable like guitar parts, or helping with drums, or, helping with tours for certain artists, and making hits, but then you never know their name. And they're not even listed as kind of being credited as a member of the band. They're lucky if they get kind of a little, asterisk note, like in the, the physical CD, like notes for certain songs. And so, one, it was just a really cool show to see some of the history behind some of these pieces and meet some of these people. But two, yeah, it just was interesting then to think about kind of their career and their kind of part-time. It'd be as if, and who knows, maybe higher ed is going to get more to this point, but, there's a lot of people kind of side gigging and doing stuff for hire these days. And so it's just interesting to think about that on the musical side, as opposed to, kind of individual artists who are established and kind of have a band that they use consistently or tour with. And so yeah, it's a pretty good one if you're at all interested in some more of the behind the scenes to music making.
Yeah. I don't know if there must be, because I feel like people talk about it a lot, or they have talked about it a lot in like the last couple of years. Like some sort of documentary that's like that equivalent for movies. There's like script doctors that'll just like come in, to kind of surgically fix, troubled movie scripts, or, just any of that kind of stuff. And like, it's just like so many untold stories and unsung heroes of, entertainment, or just like, a lot of aspects of life. But sometimes it's really interesting in entertainment because there's like certain people, that become household names and they're superstars and all that. And it's like, there's a lot of other people that were, doing things behind the scenes for them. And especially somebody who it's like, you maybe just had this very brief ascent with like, a rock star for a little while. And then you're like, and you'll just have that story of just like, yeah, I went on tour for 1 year with like, whoever. And it's just like, what? Like,
yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, we will end here on the optimistic note, as we always do. So what are some things that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world? Yeah,
so some work-related, like academic and work-related stuff. I just recently joined NILOA as a coach. NILOA is the National Institute of Learning Outcomes Assessment. And I was able to become their newest coach, which just means that institutions can kind of apply to them, asking for assistance or support or consulting and coaching. And then NILOA tries to pair them up with their one of their 14 or 15 coaches, and you get to go there and check it out. So while I'm a new coach, I've not yet gone on any site visits. So I'm looking forward to hopefully having 2 of those this coming year. And and starting this spring 2019, while I said I've been initially just starting to gather some articles, spring 2019, I'll start to formally, officially kind of get into my lit review for my doc program and start chipping away at the big final project. So that's that. But in the more immediate future, really excited for a family trip this fall, end of September, early October, going to Hawaii. And we're pretty excited, and we've never been and had an idea to go. I'd say to be honest, the big impetus is our little one turns 2 in December. So we were trying to still get under that radar of, under 2 kids fly free. So we'll be taking a toddler to Hawaii and enjoying that big family vacation.
Very cool. All good stuff going on there. And it's neat just to have almost like that. I guess I don't know how, it's like kind of like freelance. Yeah. You're sort of like, maybe that you're the hired gun of, assessment or something, being able to like go to campus, like if they have a particular project or initiative or something that they're trying to do, or just, you can just keep, utilizing and sharing, which is something I've always appreciated about higher ed, as much as it's like, it could be like business and it's like, okay, theoretically we're all competing with each other, but also like it's a very collaborative space, and just, it's just nice that you will get that opportunity to go to some places and stuff. And then, just kind of hustle towards that vacation. That'll be awesome as well. And it's definitely best of luck with the dissertation stuff, because I know that's also kind of I don't know. I guess, are you trying to get it done like as quickly as possible, or are you kind of going for like a long marathon with it?
Well, so the good news is I'm in an EDD program, so it's more practitioner focused, and so as long as you stay the course, it should just be 3 years, as opposed to, I guess you could take longer, but if I should finish up with classes by next fall, so that'll be 2 years kind of full of classes, and that third year is kind of just all writing. So I'm pretty confident I'll be able to finish in that 3-year window. I'm putting good vibes out there.
Right, yeah, because it's like open to like life may happen, but it's like, seems like you're on a good track so far. Because I know just like working with a lot of like online adult learners and stuff, like like stuff happens where it's like a momentary disruption or something, and just obviously still having the commitment to see it through and finish. But as long as you go about it the right way, those things can be managed. But that's good, because I think that would just always be tough to me, like working on something for so long, like I've seen some people do, but it's like that also just helps balance it, so it's never as stressful. But it's like I can certainly understand the value and just kind of that quick sprint just to get it done, because the longer you do it, the more often you might have sort of life stuff get in the way. But and
that's my personality, and like I don't think I could sustain that kind of a project for too long, just because I'm the kind of like I'll dive into something, and so I feel like I already feel nervous about trying to restrain myself and only doing these scheduled swim sessions, so to speak. But because I'm the kind of like, if it's a paper, if it's a big project, I want to get as much of it done or get as deep into it as I can to then know how to kind of schedule my time from there. So I don't even know if it'd be really hard for me to try and sustain it to a really long extended timeline, unless just by nature you have to, right? Like it's dependent on these other things happening over time, and so you can only do so much within this year, because then this other thing has to happen to kind of be the gate that opens for you to move on. But left to my own devices, I will be probably diving in and working as fast and furiously as as I can and as my family allows.
All right. Yeah. Well, yeah, good luck. I mean, just getting through these next couple of years here, and that's just gonna be awesome for you, though. Just kind of focus and like push through and get it done. It sounds like it's a pretty manageable pace, but enjoy the vacation and all that, and just really appreciate your time and all that you shared, and I appreciate you just geeking out about this work that you're doing, and I'm sure we will talk again soon.
Yeah, no, this was so great to be able to not only share but also be to chat more with you, because as we were talking about before, we've read each other's work and we're regularly in certain circles with one another, but aren't always taking the time to sit down and chat.
Yeah,
future conferences for sure.
Yes, yeah, it's like podcast is always a good excuse just to have some good quality chats with folks. So, hopefully, I'll see you maybe around the conference and stuff. But again, appreciate your time, and just have a good rest of your day.
All right, thanks, you too, Dustin.
This podcast is a proud member of the Connect EDU podcast network, bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter at connectedupod. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.